Good morning. Growing up, my brother George and I both were perfectionists and very competitive. There were many times when, as a child, I resented him for stealing my spotlight. After all, we each graduated from Stuyvesant High School with a very high average. We each played the piano for upwards of 12 years, among other things. Our family was its very own race to the top. Despite my jealousy, I loved my brother and was fiercely protective of him. But it would be years before I was able to appreciate George for the wonderful human being that he was. When he went off to college, to Cooper Union, his maturity allowed me to see his intelligence, his generosity, and his compassion, not to mention his dry sense of humor. And this appreciation continued to grow after he enrolled in graduate school at the University of California at Berkeley. Ironically, when he was living at the opposite end of the country, we spoke more than we ever had. We'd talk about music, television, and movies, as well as more serious topics. He even would ask my advice, something that he'd never done while growing up. But then I was no longer the bossy older sister I'd been, and could recognize his ability to make intelligent, rational decisions. We even went to a Yankee game during his last summer visit home. Little did I know that our perfectionism would take an ugly turn, and that our time enjoying each other's company as adults would be cut drastically and tragically short. For both of us, our struggle to be the best led to dark thoughts and suicidal impulses. I was fortunate to have been vocal enough to receive help, to give me the strength to hang on as I navigated those dark, hopeless waters. My brother, however, chose to suffer in silence. Although I sensed that aspects of George's decision to search for a job after receiving his master's degree rather than continuing on with the PhD program bothered him, I had no idea how much. I knew better than to push for him to talk about his feelings, as it was the surest way to get him to shut down, and only sought to reassure him that the PhD program would be there for him when he was ready to go back to it. He never gave himself the chance. Just a few days before his birthday, my brother walked into the Berkeley campus, handed in his master's thesis, went back to the Silicon Valley apartment he'd recently moved into, and hanged himself. My family knew that something was wrong when we called to wish George a happy birthday and couldn't reach him. The local police discovered his lifeless body in his bedroom the morning after what would have been his 24th birthday. And ever since that day, I've been an only child in a two-child family. With him living so far away, it can be easy to trick ourselves into believing that he's still alive in California. That his wake and funeral and all the days since then have been nothing but one long nightmare. But of course, it isn't a dream and will never awaken. Of all the things that I did as George's older sister, the one thing that I failed to do was to teach him that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I failed to show him that as difficult as things can get, and as hopeless as they may seem, life always gets better. And now my family and I will forever suffer from the loss of a talented and vibrant young man with limitless potential. Since that day, so much has changed, yet so much has remained the same. I married my husband, and after our wedding, thought only that George would have gotten along wonderfully with his new brother-in-law. I gave birth to our son, my brother's namesake, who will turn 1 year old in 2 days, and whose uncle never had a chance to hold him. And when my son looks at me with my brother's eyes and with my brother's face, I think of how George will stay forever young in our memories, while the rest of us have to go on living without him. And yet, there is a way to give my brother's tragic death some meaning, to honor and cherish the memories of all those men and women we have lost, thus bringing us here today. We have a responsibility to those we've lost and to those of us who have been left behind to ensure that we do all within our power to keep such a tragedy from ever happening again. We must make certain that no young light is quenched after suffering in silence from hope and despair, and that no other families and friends are left to suffer the feelings of unspeakable anger, grief, and guilt as they come to terms with the fact that their loved one is gone, yet they're still living. And while walking today may seem like a small way to show our dedication, as we stand here together in solidarity, we stand strong.